Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll continue our reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, Celestial Dynasties, Chapter number 22, the Lunar Dynasty. Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangum Langhaite Girim, Yat Kripatamam Bante, Shri Gurum Din Tarinam, Paramananda Madhavam, Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram, Hari Om Tat Sat. The Lunar Dynasty. After describing the descendants of Mitrayu's daughter Ahalya, Shukadev turned to those of his youngest son. Somaka, like his father, Somaka had 4 sons, the youngest of whom, Prishta, fathered King Drupad, the father of Draupadi. Drishtadumna was the eldest of Drupad's many sons, and his son was Drishtaketu. All these descendants are also known as descendants of Bharmayavashava of the Panchal dynasty. Shukadev next spoke of the descendants of Ajamidha's youngest son, Riksha. His son Samavarana married the sun god's daughter, Tapati. He fathered the famous King Kuru in her womb, who founded Kurukshetra of King Kuru's 4 sons. The eldest had no progeny. Shukadev spoke of the dynasties of the second Sudhanu and the third Janu. He listed 10 generations of kings descending from Sudhanu, among whom were the kings of the 5 Chedi states. Brihadrath was the eldest of the Chedi clan. Being without issue, Brihadrath petitioned a sage to enable him to have a son. This sage gave him a charmed mango and said, "Give this to your favorite queen and she will soon bear you a son." Brihadrath halved the mango and gave half to each of his 2 queens, thinking they would each bear him a son. Instead, they each gave birth to half of a baby. Disappointed, the mother had the 2 lifeless halves thrown away. A she-demon named Jara came across the 2 halves, and when she joined them together, the baby came to life. Thus he became known as Jarasandha, joined by Jara. Shukadev named 3 generations descending from Jarasandha and then began to speak about the kings descending from Kuru's other son, Janu. 12 generations from after Janu was Pratipa, who sired 3 mighty sons, Devapi, Shantanu, and Bhalika. The eldest of them, Devapi, suffered from skin disease, so the people, objecting to his being crowned king, disappointed, Devapi retired to the forest, where he will practice mystic yoga until the end of Kali Yuga. At the beginning of the next Satyuga, he will re-establish the lunar dynasty. After Devapi's departure, his brother Shantanu became the king. In his previous life, Shantanu was the extremely pious monarch Mahabisha, and he could make a person youthful by merely touching them. Hence he was known as Shantanu. However, his kingdom experienced 12 years of drought. His Brahmin advisors told him this was because he had usurped his elder brother's kingdom. On hearing this and bearing in mind the welfare of the citizens, Shantanu went to the forest to request Devapi to return and take charge of the kingdom. However, his chief minister Aswavara secretly instructed several Brahmins to go ahead of Shantanu and ensure that Devapi did not return. They induced Devapi to blaspheme the Vedas. When Shantanu and his ministers heard Devapi's heretical views, they agreed he was not fit to be the king. Thus Shantanu remained the king, and Indra again showered rain on the kingdom. After this incident, Devapi went to Kalpagram, where he still practices mystic yoga. At the beginning of the next Satyuga, Devapi will re-establish the Soma dynasty in this world, that is the lunar dynasty. Shukadev briefly mentioned Pratipa's youngest son Bahlika. His son Somadatta had 3 sons, Bhuri, Bhurishrava, and Shala. On hearing their names, Parikshit remembered hearing that Bahlika was the oldest warrior who had fought in the battle of Kurukshetra alongside his son and grandsons. However, since Shantanu was the forefather of both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, Shukadev next focused on his progeny. Shantanu's first wife was the goddess Ganga, and in her womb Shantanu begot the exalted self-realized devotee and scholar Bhishma. He was renowned as the foremost of the warriors. He even satisfied Lord Parshuram by defeating him in single combat. From the womb of his second wife, a fisherman's daughter named Satyavati, Chitrangada was born. When a Gandharva of the same name killed him, his younger brother Vichitravirya ascended the throne. Besides these two sons, Satyavati had one son, Parashar Muni, sired before her marriage to Shantanu. This son was the famous sage Vyasadev, who happened to be both Shukadev's father and preceptor. Shukadev said, "My father, sage Vyasadev, rejected his disciples headed by Paila and instead instructed me in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam because he saw I was free of all material desires." He then again spoke of Vichitravirya's Bhishma. Bhishma abducted King Kashiraja's daughter to marry his brother, King Vichitravirya. Unfortunately, the king was overly fond of his two wives, Ambika and Ambalika, and spent far too much time enjoying sense gratification in their company. Subsequently, he died at a young age of tuberculosis. Since he died without issue, Satyavati asked her firstborn sons Vyasadev to sire offspring in the wombs of Vichitravirya's wife. Ambika became the mother of Dhritarashtra, Ambalika the mother of Pandu, and their maidservant the mother of Vidura. Dhritarashtra, the eldest son of Vichitravirya, married Gandhari, who bore him 100 sons headed by Duryodhan and one daughter, Dushala. Vichitravirya's second son, Pandu, could not personally sire children in his wives due to a curse. Therefore, the gods begot sons in the wombs of his two wives. Kunti, the elder wife, became the mother of Yudhishthir, Bhim, and Arjun. The boys' fathers were Dharmraj, Vayu, and Indra. Pandu's younger wife, Madri, gave birth to the twins Nakul and Sahadev. Their fathers were the twin Ashwini Kumar brothers, the gods' physicians. All five of Pandu's sons married Draupadi, and each conceived a son in her womb. Shukadev reminded Parikshit that these 5 sons were his uncles. "Alas, I never met them," said Parikshit. Shukadev said, "As you know, Yudhishthir's son was Prativindhya, Bhima's Shrutasena, Arjun's Shrutakirti, Nakul's Shatanika, and Sahadev's Shrutkarma. Each of your grandfathers also had issues by other wives. Among these were the heroic Ghatotkach, Bhim's son, by the demoness Hidimbi, Iravan, Arjun's son by the Naga princess Ulupi, and the heroic Bhabru Vahana, Arjun's son by the Manipuri princess, whom his maternal grandfather adopted. Your father Abhimanyu, born to Arjun by his wife Subhadra, was a great warrior, able to contend with 1,000 charioteers single-handedly. Your mother was Uttara, the daughter of King Virat. As you know, the entire Kuru dynasty was annihilated in the battle of Kurukshetra. You two were almost destroyed when Ashwathama hurled the Brahmastra atomic weapon at your mother's womb. Thankfully, Lord Krishna saved you from death. Of your 4 powerful sons, Janmejya is the eldest. When he learns that the Takshak snake killed you, in great anger he will execute a sacrifice to destroy all snakes. Janmejya will establish his rule throughout the world, and after accepting Tura as his priest, will perform many horse sacrifices. His son Shatanika will learn the Vedas from Yajnavalkya, military arts from Kripa, and transcendental science from Shaunak. Shukadev then named 25 generations descending from Shatanika, the last of whom was King Kshemaka. Thus he concluded, I have described the moon god's dynasty from which both Brahmins and Kshatriyas came, and which is worshipped by gods and saints. Now listen as I tell you the future of the Magad dynasty. After listing 22 generations descending from Jarasandh, Shukadev said all these personalities belong to the Brihadratha's dynasty, which will rule the world for 1,000 years. This brings us to the end of this chapter, chapter number 22, the Lunar Dynasty. And now we will read from chapter 23, Anu's Descendants. Having concluded his description of Puru's dynasty, Shukadev next spoke of Yayati's fourth son Anu. 16 generations after Anu was a king named Romapad, who, having no issue of his own, adopted Shanta, the daughter of his friend King Dashrath. Shanta married the sage Rishyashringa. Parikshit asked how Shanta, the royal princess, came to marry a sage. Shukdev explained that Romapad once cheated a Brahmin. Consequently, all the Brahmins in his kingdom emigrated to other lands. From that time, there was no rain in his kingdom, and thus a severe famine followed. Romapad invited Brahmins to his court and asked them how he could remedy the situation. They advised him to find a sage who had never seen a woman. If such a sage were to come to his kingdom, the rains would follow. The king sent his spies in search of such a person. After some time, one returned and told him of Rishyashringa. He was the son of the hermit Vibhandak, who lived deep in the wilderness. Vibhandak once saw the Apsara Urvashi and involuntarily discharged semen into the river. A deer drank the semen along with the river water and later gave birth to a human boy with antlers on his forehead, for which he was named Rishyashringa. This boy grew up in the jungles, never seeing anyone other than his father Vibhandaka. On hearing Rishyashringa, Romapada assigned his most attractive courtesans to bring him to the court. The young ladies boarded a boat and sailed to Vibhandaka's hermitage. One of the girls entered the ashram when Rishyashringa was alone and befriended him. She told him she was the daughter of a Muni who lived downriver. Rishyashringa was fascinated by his new friend, and when invited, he followed her to the boat. The ladies embraced him and led him aboard, entertaining him with music, dance, and theatre as they sailed back to Romapada's capital. Desiring to keep him in his kingdom, Romapada offered Rishyashringa his daughter Shanta in marriage. Subsequently, Rishyashringa performed a sacrifice which brought rain to the kingdom. He also performed sacrifices by which his father-in-law Romapad and his friend Dashrath had sons. The son born to Romapad was Chaturanga. Dashrath had 4 sons, Lord Ramchandra, Bharat, Lakshman, and Shatrughan. The 9th generation following Chaturanga was Adhirath, who found a baby boy wrapped in a basket. Kunti had deserted this baby when he was born out of wedlock. Since he had no sons, Adhirath raised the boy as his own. This son later became known as Karan. Karan only had one son, Vrishasena. Shukadev then briefly listed 8 generations descending from Yayati's third son, Dhruyu, and 6 generations descending from his second son, Turvasu. Dushmanta was the last of these. He had been adopted from the Puru lineage and raised by King Marut. A descendant of Turvasu, Dushmanta later desired to become the emperor, and thus he returned to Puru's family. Having briefly spoken about the dynasties of Yayati's younger sons, Shukadev said, "Hear now about the dynasty of King Yayati's eldest son Yadu. This description is extremely pious. Simply hearing it, one is free from all sinful reactions. This is because Krishna appeared in Yadu's lineage." Shukadev named Yadu's 4 sons, but then focused his attention on the dynasties of the 2 eldest, Sahasrajit and Kroshta. He listed 13 generations of Sahasrajit. The 11th was Kartavirya Arjun, whom Parshuram killed. Shukadev said not only was Kartavirya Arjun the emperor of the world consisting of 7 islands, but he also possessed all 8 mystic perfections which he received from the Tattreya and incarnation of Vishnu. Indeed, no other king could equal Kartavirya Arjun in performing sacrifice, giving charity, austerity, mystic powers, education, strength, or mercy. He ruled the earth for 85,000 years, continuously enjoying all kinds of worldly pleasure with full vigor and unimpaired mental faculty. Kartavirya Arjun conceived 100 sons, all of whom bar 5 were killed by Parshuram. Among the descendants of these 5 was King Talajanga, whose descendants were defeated by King Sagar. Among them, however, 2 are especially important, Madhu and Vrishni. The dynasties known as the Yadavas, the Madhavas, and the Vrishni originate from Yadu, Madhu, and Vrishni respectively. Having highlighted some kings of particular import in Sahasrajit's line, Shukadev turned his attention to the dynasty descending from Yadu's second son, Kroshta. While listing 11 generations of Kroshta's descendants, he spoke briefly about King Shashabindu, King Ushana, and King Jayamagha, as they were the forefathers of Lord Krishna. He said Shashabindu was a great mystic who possessed 14 invaluable jewels. As the world's emperor, he married 10,000 wives and begot innumerable sons. One of his great grandsons, Ushana, who performed 100 horses sacrifice, begot Jayamagha. He had no issue. Despite this, he did not marry again out of fear of upsetting his wife. Shukadev narrated a humorous anecdote concerning Jayamagha. He once abducted a prostitute from a rival king's court. When Jayamagha's queen saw the girl sitting on her husband's lap, she became distraught and accused him of adultery. Anxious to pacify his wife, Jayamagha swore that he had brought the girl not for himself but to become their daughter-in-law. His queen Shabya chided him. How is that possible? I am barren and have no co-wife, so how do you intend her to become our daughter-in-law? As it so happened, Jayamagha made his promise true. How was that possible? Asked Parikshit. Many years previously, Jayamagha had satisfied the gods and forefathers. Thus he now petitioned them, and by their mercy, Shabya became pregnant. Her son Vidarbha honored his father's word and married the prostitute when he came of age. So this brings us to the end of chapter 22, Anu's Descendants. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.